My name's Tom Macey-Dare. I'm a barrister here at Quadrant Chambers. I specialise in commercial law, and one of my main areas of practice is shipping. And today I'm going to be answering the question, what is a time charter? At its simplest, a time charter is a contract between two people, a ship owner and a charterer, under which the ship owner agrees to provide the services of a ship to the charterer in return for a payment known as hire. It's called a time charter because the amount of money that the charterer has to pay in hire is dependent on the amount of time for which he receives the services of the ship. And the easiest way to illustrate that is by reference to the basic classic form of time charter, which is known as the period time charter. So a period time charter is where the owner agrees to provide the services of the ship to the charterer for an agreed period of time. That period might be very precisely defined. For example, it might be for 1 year, or it might be defined in a little bit more of a flexible way. For example, 6 months plus or minus 15 days in charterer's option. But under both of those formulations, the duration of the charter is fixed by reference to a period of time that the parties agree in advance. And a homespun analogy of that sort of charter is if you were to, for example, book a chauffeur-driven car to ferry your family around for a day or 2 days for a wedding. So that's the basic type of time charter. But there's another form which is a little bit less intuitive but also very common, and that is the trip time charter. Now, under a trip time charter, the owner agrees to provide the services of the ship for as long as it takes to perform a specified trip. So, for example, the contract might say 1 time charter trip via safe ports from the east coast of the USA to China. And in that sort of time charter, the amount of hire that the charterer ends up paying will depend on how long it takes to complete that trip. Another homespun analogy for you, suppose you were to get into a black London taxi. You get in and you say, I want to go to Wembley Stadium to watch the football. I've got a few friends to pick up on the way. First one at King's Cross Station, next one at Heathrow Airport. Taxi driver says, OK, Gov, switches on the meter and off he goes to King's Cross and then to Heathrow and finally to Wembley. And there the meter continues to run until the trip is over, and the amount of money you pay depends on how long that trip took. So under a time charter, the charterer gets to decide where the ship goes, what cargo it carries, but the charterer doesn't get possession of the ship, and the charterer doesn't employ the master and the crew who sail the ship. And that reflects a fundamental division of rights and responsibilities under a time charter. The charterer controls how the ship is employed in a commercial sense, but the owner remains responsible for navigation and for the technical operation of the ship. There are a number of common standard forms which are in use for time charters, and the one that you will most commonly see is called the New York Produce Exchange Form, or NYPE for short. That's a general purpose form which is suitable for very many different types of ship and different types of trade. There are also a number of more specialist forms that you'll commonly see which are tailored for specific trades. So, for example, in the tanker trade, which is carrying oil and petroleum products, you'll very commonly see the shell time form. And for offshore vessels that work on oil platforms and offshore wind farms, those vessels are often chartered out under the supply time form. And there are many other examples of specialised standard forms. When we're considering time charters, it's important to not confuse them with the other common types of charter party that one encounters. And there are really two main ones. The first of these, and the most important, is the voyage charter. Voyage charter is a contract under which the ship owner agrees to load a cargo at place A, carry it to place B, and to discharge it there in return for a payment called freight. Like a time charterer, a voyage charterer doesn't get possession of the ship, and he doesn't employ the master and the crew. But unlike a time charterer, the amount of money that the voyage charterer pays does not depend on how long the voyage lasts. So the risk of delay in a voyage charter is principally on the shipowner. Then the second type of commonly encountered charter party that one sees is the demise charter or bareboat charter. Now, under a bareboat charter, the charterer agrees to hire the ship from the shipowner for an agreed period of time in return for a payment called hire. Sounds very much like the time charter. But there's a crucial difference. Under a bareboat charter, the charterer gets physical possession of the ship and is responsible for employing the master and the crew, and is responsible for all the technical and navigational aspects. And bareboat charters are, in effect, a financing mechanism which people use in order to finance purchases of a ship. Finally, I'm just going to run through a number of the very common terms that one finds in time charters. This is just an edited selection of the many standard type of terms that one sees. These are some of the most important. First of all, clause. That's a clause which relieves the charterer of the obligation to pay hire in certain circumstances where he's deprived of the services of the ship through no fault of his own. For example, where the ship suffers a mechanical breakdown. Next one is the withdrawal clause, very important commercially. This is the clause which gives the shipowner the right to withdraw his ship from the charterer's service and to terminate the charter if the charterer fails to pay an instalment of hire on time and in full. Thirdly is the safe port and safe berth clause. This is a clause which contains a warranty by the charterer that any port or any berth to which he orders the vessel to go will be safe for the vessel to reach, to use, and to depart from in the absence of some abnormal event. Fourthly, the employment clause, and this is really the essence of a time charter. This is a clause which provides that the master, that's the captain, although appointed by the owner of the ship, has to obey the charterer's orders as to employment of the ship. In other words, where the ship goes and what the cargo carries. And this clause also provides that the master is required to sign bills of lading as presented by the charterer. A bill of lading is, in essence, a receipt which the master issues to acknowledge that he's received goods on board the ship. And it's also a contract of carriage between the ship owner and whoever owns that cargo. Fifthly, the indemnity clause. This is a clause which provides that the charterer will indemnify the ship owner against the consequences of complying with his orders. So if the charterer orders the ship to go somewhere and the ship does it and then a loss arises, the indemnity clause allows the ship owner to be compensated by the charterer for having done his bidding. And sometimes there's no express indemnity clause, in which case the law generally implies one. And then finally, the paramount clause. This is a clause which incorporates the Hague rules into the charter, and those rules have very far-reaching implications for the rights and obligations of the parties. So there we are. That is, in a nutshell, a time charter. Thank you very much.